So before getting started on this video today, I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page regarding how the pieces of the Triforce are represented in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild specifically. And this is a popular theory. A lot of people have already made this connection. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty confident that it is what Nintendo are going for. So it's essentially where you have the Sheikah technology that we're all very used to seeing in Breath of the Wild is representative of the Triforce of Wisdom. And then the Malice emitting from Calamity Ganon represents the Triforce of Power. And then the strange green spiraling energy that we see emitting from the hand in the sequels trailer represents the Triforce of Courage. So the popular theory that's been going around on YouTube is that these different energies sources symbolize the powers of the Triforce. So the green energy that we see in the sequel trailer is symbolic of courage. The Sheikah technology, the blue Sheikah technology, is symbolic of Zelda's wisdom, and the Malice from Ganon is obviously representative of his power. So it's symbolism, and many would believe that it's nothing more than that. But my theory, I'm going to take it a step further and assume that these energy sources are actually not just symbolic of the Triforce, but they actually are the Triforce itself. Like they are the pieces of the Triforce itself, essentially manifesting in a somewhat physical sense on their own without a user essentially making use of their powers. So in other words, Malice is the Triforce of Power removing itself from its user. So it's removing itself from Ganondorf. The Triforce of Power itself has removed itself. You can say the same thing about the Triforce of Courage. It removed itself from Link. The Sheikah technology is the Triforce of Wisdom removed from the user of the Triforce of Wisdom. So before we go any further with this idea, let's talk a little bit about the actual creation of Hyrule mentioned in Ocarina of Time, because they claim that each of the goddesses had their own part to play when it came to how they structured the world. So Din, the goddess of power, shaped the world. She gave it the shape that we know. She created the mountains and the fields and all of that. And the goddess of wisdom gave law and order to that world. Gave logic to it, essentially. The laws that probably a lot of the laws that we on our world are used to dealing with, gravity, that sort of thing. And then the goddess of courage, with her rich soul, it claims, created life in the world of Hyrule. So all of the denizens of Hyrule, probably the Gorons and the Gerudos and just the animals and the creatures and all living things. All living, breathing things were created and given life by the goddess of courage. So let's go ahead and start off with power and Ganondorf and demise and how all of this came to be. How the Triforce of Power came into the hands of both Demise and Ganondorf, and then how it eventually got to the point that it is now in Breath of the Wild sequel, and even the first Breath of the Wild, how Malice and power, the Triforce of Power, was capable of removing itself from its original wielder, which was Ganondorf. Malice is power. A demon has no power unless he has hatred in his heart. Demise's hatred, therefore, is now inseparable from the Triforce of Power. In the beginning of Skyward Sword, its opening also claims that Demise and his demons sprouted from the ground. And as we all know, Din was responsible for creating the actual shape and earth ground of the world of Hyrule. That was her part to play. So for the demons to be rising from this, it makes a lot of sense, because I do believe that they are a byproduct of Din's part of the creation. The beginning also claims that the reason why Demise and his demons sprouted from the ground in the first place was because they were in seek of the Triforce. So it says that they had an innate natural lust for the Triforce. And I believe that they specifically wanted the piece of the Triforce that was power, and they unknowingly were lusting for that specific piece. As we all know, Demise was unable to actually wield the Triforce in any way, but I don't think it was just because he was defeated. I think that if he actually did succeed against the goddess Hylia and the forces on the world, the Earth Dwellers as they're called, if he was able to defeat them and he did get his hands on the Triforce, we know through the story of the goddess Hylia that he would not be able to wield it. Hyrule Historia, as well as Skyward Sword itself, claims that the goddess Hylia attempted to use the powers of the Triforce to not just seal Demise, which the seal was also claimed to be very weak, so they knew he was going to escape eventually. She attempted to actually be like, all right, well, fine, I'm going to actually destroy him entirely by using the power of the Triforce. Unfortunately for her, the Triforce cannot be used by any god. It's not a tool that can be used by gods. It's only something that can be used by mortals. So, as we all know, as the story goes, the goddess Hylia removed her godhood. She cast aside her godhood and became mortal. And essentially, she became, as we all know, Zelda is her mortal form. And that mortal form was eventually Zelda was made to be worthy of the Triforce of Wisdom. So she became worthy of wielding the Triforce of Wisdom after she became human and proved herself wise. So Demise followed suit. He essentially followed in her footsteps and realized, like, okay, so if I want the Triforce of Power, if I want the Triforce at all, I need to put myself in a mortal form. He won't be able to achieve it as Demise. So after his defeat in Skyward Sword, he essentially awaited for a proper candidate, a mortal that would be given the Triforce of Power by right. So Demise essentially had to corrupt or potentially even possess someone with innate power, someone who already had a right to power from the beginning of their lives, and that would be a male Gerudo. As we know from the lore, male Gerudos are all made kings. They become the king, they become the chieftain of the Gerudos immediately. As we all know, every 100 years a male Gerudo is born and they are immediately made king. So it's a guaranteed crown to be a male Gerudo. You're born male as a Gerudo, you will be king. So who better for Demise to take over than that? You know, he has all the power, he has all the right to power as it is. And it seems like Din probably thought the same thing. My thought is that Ganon wasn't born with the Triforce of Power simply because as I said, Zelda earned the Triforce of Wisdom. Once she became human, it wasn't just that, in other words, Zelda is not wise because she has the Triforce of Wisdom. She has the Triforce of Wisdom because she is wise. She earned the right to wield it because of her wisdom, and it was bestowed upon her because of that. And the same can be said about Link. Link is not courageous because he wields the Triforce of Courage. It is because he is courageous that he has the Triforce of Courage, that he earned it, essentially. So the Triforces are things that the user must earn. They must make themselves worthy of it, of its power. And the same can be said about Ganondorf. My belief is that Ganondorf, once he grew up and became a leader, became a king, he proved himself both to the goddess Din as well as his people, and probably more than likely as well as Demise. Once his worth was proven and he was granted the Triforce of Power, he was naturally corrupted by it. I mean, think about it. What is one of the most iconic sayings regarding power? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Ganondorf, being born in natural power and then being given ultimate power through the form of the Triforce of Power, he was corrupted. And it only makes sense that that would be the case, because anyone who gained the Triforce of Power would be corrupted by it. So in other words, the goddess Hylia was unable to use the Triforce as an immortal, so she cast aside her godhood and obtained the Triforce of Wisdom by right of blood. So Demise would follow in her footsteps and corrupt one who was born with innate power, a male Gerudo. Din anointed Ganondorf with power, potentially without knowing he was quote-unquote possessed by Demise. And so power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Ganon inherited power and became evil. So Ganon is unfairly forced down a path of unavoidable corruption. power becomes inseparable from malice and hatred. And once separated from its source, in this case, Ganon's corpse, it manifests as this deadly plague.